At 19, Ren Calloway had $43, a dead car, and one person in the world who'd stayed. His name was Augie. They'd grown up in the same group home, aged out 14 months back, and hadn't slept under a real roof since the engine quit on a coastal highway and left them walking into a half-dead harbor town nobody remembered the name of. Cedar Point. That's where they found the auction. The town was selling off everything nobody wanted. Rusted crab pots, busted dock line, and one 42-foot steel fishing trawler that hadn't moved in 8 years. Its captain had vanished. The whole town called the boat cursed. The opening bid was $10. Not one hand went up. Ren raised hers, and the harbor master, standing at the back of the crowd with his arms crossed, went pale as a sheet. For $10, 2 homeless teenagers owned a boat the entire town was afraid of. Everyone figured they'd bought a coffin made of rust. But 3 nights later, deep in the hull, behind a steel plate that didn't sound like the others, Ren found a sealed compartment. And what was locked inside wasn't junk. It wasn't rot. It was a secret somebody in Cedar Point had spent 8 years trying to bury. A dead man's voice. And a truth that could burn the whole harbor down. At 19, Ren Calloway had $43, a dead car, and one person in the world who had stayed. His name was Augie Fenn. They had grown up in the same group home, different beds, same ceiling. They had aged out of the system 14 months ago, on the same gray morning, with the same 2 words from a caseworker who couldn't meet their eyes. Good luck. That was it. 14 years in foster care. And the goodbye was 2 words and a paper bag of their own belonging. So they had learned to depend on no one except each other. The sedan died on a Thursday afternoon in early October. No warning, no cough, no slow fade. 1 second, the engine was running. The next, it wasn't. Ren pulled to the shoulder of a 2-lane coastal highway and sat there with both hands on the wheel while the engine ticked and cooled. Augie was in the passenger seat with his notebook open on his knee. He kept lists, towns within walking distance, places that might pay cash for a day's work, things to fix, things to learn. He'd been keeping lists since he was 14, when he figured out nobody was going to teach him how to survive. He closed the notebook. How bad? He said. Ren turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. She tried again. Same. She knew engines. She'd spent 3 summers in a boatyard wiping grease off her arms, learning what the old men there were too tired to explain twice. She popped the hood. She checked the terminals, the starter, the fuses. Everything looked fine, which meant the problem was deeper than she could reach, with no tools and no parts on the side of a road that nobody drove down. We walk, she said. Augie was already gathering their things. 2 backpacks, a sleeping bag, a plastic grocery bag of clothes. Everything they owned fit in their 2 pairs of arms. There was a green sign up ahead. Cedar Point, 3 miles. They left the car unlocked, keys on the seat. If somebody wanted a dead sedan, they could have it. Ren looked back at it once before they started walking. That car had been home for 5 months. Before that, a shelter. Before that, a motel parking lot where the manager let them sleep if they swept the lot at dawn. Before that, things Ren didn't let herself think about. The highway hugged the coast. They smelled salt before they saw water, heard gulls before they saw the town. Cedar Point came around a bend all at once, a small harbor town built into a natural cove. From the road above, Ren could read the whole place in one look. A main street running parallel to the water, a cluster of docks, boats tied up, most of them sitting low, like they hadn't moved in years. Half the storefronts on Main Street had brown paper taped over the windows. Looks like it's dying, Augie said. It did. They walked down the hill into it, middle of the afternoon. Streets nearly empty. A man on a bench reading a paper. A woman walking a small dog past a shuttered real estate office. The harbor was flat and gray and quiet. The only place that looked alive was a diner on the corner where Main Street met the harbor road. A hand-painted sign hung over the door. The compass rose. Through the window, a counter. Stools. A few booths. A woman wiping down tables. The bell jingled when they walked in. The woman looked up. 60s, maybe? Silver hair pulled back. reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her name tag said Marlene. She took one look at them. The backpacks, the sleeping bag rolled tight under Augie's arm. The way two kids walk in like they're not sure they're allowed. Sit anywhere, sweethearts, she said. They slid into a booth by the window. Wren opened the menu and did the math she always did. 2 coffees and a plate of toast. $3 in change. They could afford that. And still have enough for whatever came next. Augie was reading it the same way. Prices first, descriptions never. Marlene came over with 2 glasses of water. She looked at the backpacks, the sleeping bag, the way they were both studying the cheapest line on the menu like it was a test. She didn't say a word about it. Kitchen just made a fresh pot of chowder, she said. Made way too much. You'd be doing me a favor finishing it. Otherwise, I'm throwing it out. Wren looked at Augie. They both knew what was happening. This woman was feeding them for free and handing them their dignity back across the table while she did it. We wouldn't want it to go to waste, Augie said. Marlene brought 2 bowls, thick and hot, bread on the side, coffee without being asked. Then she let them eat in peace, moving around the empty diner, doing her work. When they were almost done, she came back and leaned against the booth. Passing through? Car died, Wren said, 3 miles back. You got people here? No, ma'am. Marlene looked at them. Not with pity. With something more useful than that. There's a surplus auction down at the harbor this afternoon, she said. Town sells off whatever nobody wants. Old dock gear. Busted crab pots. Sometimes there's a decent find if you know what you're looking at. She paused. They're selling off some boats this year, too. Ones that sat too long. We don't need a boat, Wren said. A boat has a roof, Marlene said. She said it plain, like she was talking about the weather. Then she picked up the empty bowls and walked back toward the kitchen. Wren and Augie looked at each other across the table. She's not wrong, Augie said. The auction was at 2 o'clock on the main pier. A folding table, a portable microphone, a dozen locals in lawn chairs. The auctioneer was a heavy man in a fishing vest who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He moved fast. A pile of dock line went for $8. A coil of anchor chain for $12. A boat trailer with 2 flat tires for $20. Nobody got excited about anything. The whole thing had the feel of a town emptying its attic and not expecting much. Then he got to the last lot. He shuffled his papers. Read off a clipboard. Final item. Lot 17. The Eider. 42-foot steel-hulled fishing trawler. Last registered owner, Captain Elias Thorne. Status: missing, presumed dead. Vessel's been moored at Slip 14 8 years. Town's been covering the fees, sold as is, no warranty. He looked up. Opening bid, $100. Nobody moved. 50. Nothing. 25. The gulls were louder than the crowd. $10, folks, come on. It's a 42-foot boat. Scrap metal's worth more than 10. Not one hand. A man near the front shook his head. A woman leaned in and muttered something to her husband. Wren followed their eyes out to Slip 14. The Eider sat low in the water, listing a little to one side. The hull was streaked with rust and barnacles, the wheelhouse windows clouded with salt, the deck buried under gull droppings and dead leaves. But the hull was steel, not wood, not fiberglass, steel. And Wren had spent 3 summers in a boatyard. She knew what that meant. Steel didn't rot, didn't crack, it rusted. But rust could be treated, sanded, sealed. A steel hull was the strongest thing you could put in the water, going once. At $10, the auctioneer said. He sounded relieved, like he wanted nobody to want it. Wren raised her hand. The auctioneer blinked. A few heads turned. The woman in the front row looked at the 2 kids with the backpacks and the sleeping bag. Then she looked away, fast, like she'd seen something she didn't want to. Sold, he said. $10. Come see me about the paperwork, miss. And that's when Wren noticed the man at the back. He wasn't in a lawn chair like the others. He was standing, arms crossed, a windbreaker with harbor master stitched across the chest, late 50s, thick through the neck. A face that looked like it had been carrying something heavy for a long, long time. He was staring at the Eider, and his face had gone gray. Wren didn't know his name yet. Didn't know he'd been harbor master of Cedar Point for 22 years. Didn't know he'd been counting on nobody buying that boat. Counting on it, sitting forgotten until the town finally scrapped it. All she knew was the way he looked at her, like she was a problem that had just walked through the door. People had been looking at her that way her whole life. She'd stopped flinching at it years ago. They signed the paperwork. Wren counted out $10 in ones and coins onto the folding table. The auctioneer handed her a manila envelope. Title, registration, a set of keys on a corroded brass ring. Slip 14, he said. Good luck with her. That word again? Good luck. They walked down the dock. Up close, the eider was bigger than she looked. 42 feet of scarred steel, a forward deck, a wheelhouse in the middle, a working deck at the stern where the fishing gear used to go. The gangway was a weathered plank. Wren tested it with her foot before she stepped across. The deck groaned under her weight. But it held. Augie followed. They stood on the stern deck and looked around. Old rope coiled in a corner. A rusted winch bolted to the rail. Gull nests in the rigging. Everything under a layer of grime and neglect. But the deck was solid. Wren knelt and knocked on the hull, plating with her knuckles. It rang back firm and true. No soft spots. No thin patches. 8 years sitting still, and the bones of this boat were good. The engine won't run, Augie said. Practical, like always. Maybe not, Wren said. But the hull does, and it has a cabin. The cabin door took the brass key. The lock was stiff, but it turned. They stepped down into the main cabin. It was small. A galley on one side, 2-burner stove, a sink, a bench seat with storage under it, a fold-down table. Past the cabin, a narrow passage to a forward berth with a mattress that had seen better days but was dry. It smelled like old wood and diesel and salt. Not pleasant, but not rotten either. Just forgotten. Augie ran his hand along the galley counter. This was someone's home, he said. It's ours now, Wren said. They spent the rest of the daylight cleaning, found a hose on the dock, and washed down the deck. Wren cleared the gull nests from the rigging. Augie scrubbed the galley. They opened every window and hatch and let the sea air push the staleness out. By evening, the eider wasn't pretty, but she was livable. Wren got the propane stove lit. Augie found canned goods under the bench seat, old, but sealed. They heated a can of soup and ate it at the fold-down table while the last light came gold through the wheelhouse glass. When's the last time we ate twice in one day? Augie said. Wren thought about it. The shelter, she said. 3 months ago. They went quiet after that. The harbor was still, water lapping the hull in a slow, steady rhythm. Somewhere down the dock, a line clanged against a mast. A buoy bell rang once, far out, low and lonesome. They slept in the forward berth that night. The mattress was thin, the blankets were their own. But the space was dry and closed, out of the wind. And for the first time in months, Wren didn't wake every 2 hours to check if someone was trying to get into the car. There was no car. There was a steel hull between them and the world. And steel doesn't break easy. She lay in the dark and listened to Augie breathing beside her. She reached into her jacket pocket and touched the photograph she always carried. The two of them at 15. A group home farewell dinner, paper plates, plastic cups. Both of them smiling. It was the only photo where they both looked happy. That was 4 years ago. They'd been keeping each other alive ever since. The next morning, Marlene came down the dock with a paper bag. Leftover sandwiches from the morning rush, she said, handing it across the rail. They'll just go to waste. Everything with that woman was about to go to waste. Wren was starting to understand that this was just how Marlene loved people. Sideways. So they could take it without owing her anything. How's she treating you? Marlene asked. Better than the car, Wren said. She was already up to her elbows in the engine compartment, grease to the wrist. Marlene looked at the boat and shook her head slow. You know the stories about this thing, right? We heard the word cursed, Augie said. At the auction, people around here think Elias Thorne's ghost is still aboard. Nobody'd come near this slip for years. Kids used to dare each other to touch the hull. Marlene smiled. A little sad. Elias would have gotten a kick out of that. Least haunting man you ever met. Quiet as a stone. Sat at my counter every single morning. Black coffee. Never said more than 10 words at a stretch. What happened to him? Ren asked. Nobody knows for certain. He went out one night. 8 years back, took his skiff. Not the trawler. Never came back. They found the skiff drifting 2 miles offshore. Empty. No body. No note. Marlene paused. He was 74. Did he have family? A sister, Cora. Still lives at the edge of town. Little gray house past the post office. Marlene looked out at the water. Elias was here my whole life. This harbor hasn't been the same since he left. A lot of things stopped working right after he was gone. She said goodbye and walked back up the dock. Ren watched her go. She knows more than she's saying, Augie said. Maybe, Ren said. Or maybe she just misses him. They went back to work. Here is where Ren earned her $10. Because Ren didn't trust knocking on walls. She trusted paper. In the boatyard, the old men had taught her one thing above all. A boat lies, but its drawings don't. So while Augie cleaned, Ren went looking for the Eider's drawing. She found them stuffed behind a panel in the wheelhouse. Yellowed, water-stained. The original structural plans from the shipyard, decades old. She spread them on the chart table and weighed the corners down with 2 coffee mugs. And she started to walk the boat, drawing in hand, comparing frame by frame, plate by plate. The way she'd been taught, it took her most of the afternoon until she got to the lower hold. The hold was below the main deck, through a hatch near the stern. Low ceiling, Ren had to duck. 2 inches of bilge water on the floor. A few rusted tools on hooks. An old bucket, mostly empty. She crouched with the flashlight in her teeth and the drawing in her hands. And the math stopped working. Because the drawing said the hull along the port side, 2/3 forward, ran straight back to the frame. But the boat didn't. There was a panel there, 3 feet wide, 2 feet tall, set into the hull where the drawing showed solid steel and open space. The drawing was honest. The boat was lying. Augie, she called. He came down through the hatch. She put his hand flat on the panel. Then she moved it 6 inches and put it on the real hull beside it. Feel the difference? It's newer. It's hiding something. She ran her fingers along the seams. Every other weld on the hull was rough. Original, done at the shipyard before either of them was born. But this seam was smooth, neat. And along the bottom edge, where the panel met the frame, there was a thin gray line that wasn't rust and wasn't paint. Marine epoxy. Somebody had sealed this panel shut, carefully, patiently, by hand. There's a space behind here, Ren said, behind the hull, built into the structure so it'd never show on an inspection. She sat back on her heels in the bilge water. Somebody wanted this found, but only by somebody paying attention. Augie was very still. Who hides something in a boat? He said quietly, and then sinks the boat for 8 years. Somebody who didn't think he was coming back. They climbed out of the hold and stood on the deck in the cold October air. The town was quiet. Lights from the compass rose were laying long yellow streaks across the black water. Everything peaceful. But Ren kept looking back at the hatch. Whatever was behind that panel had been waiting 8 years. Waiting for someone to buy a boat nobody wanted. To climb into a hold nobody checked. To compare a drawing to a hull and catch a lie 6 inches wide. $10 and a dead car had brought her here. And now she was standing on top of a dead man's secret. They needed tools. There was a harbor workshop at the end of the pier. Ren had seen a pry bar and a chisel set on the wall through the window. They'd go at first light. They went to sleep in the forward berth. And in the middle of the night, Ren woke. Not to a dream. Not to the cold. To a sound? A scrape. Then a soft thud. On the deck, above their heads. Somebody was on the boat. Ren put her hand over Augie's mouth before he could speak and felt him come awake under it. She held one finger up in the dark. Listen. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Crossing the stern deck. Then the sound of the hold hatch lifting. Whoever it was, they weren't here for them. They were here for the hold. Ren moved. Bare feet on cold steel. She came up through the cabin and onto the deck low and fast, and she saw the shape of a man crouched at the open hatch with a flashlight pointed down into the dark. "Hey," she said. The light snapped off. The man bolted. Across the deck, over the rail, onto the dock. Wren went after him to the gangway. But by the time she hit the planks, he was already a shadow running up the pier road, and then he was gone into the dark between the streetlights. She stood there breathing hard, her heart slamming. Augie came up beside her with the flashlight. "He didn't take anything," Augie said. "The panel's still sealed. He couldn't get to it." But Wren wasn't looking at the hatch. She was looking at the dock line, the thick rope that held the bow to the cleat, the line that held the whole boat in place. She crouched and ran her thumb across it. It was cut, not frayed, not worn, cut. More than halfway through. A clean blade through good rope, a few more hours of the boat working against it in the night tide, and the line would have snapped. The eider would have drifted out of her slip, out toward the rocks at the mouth of the cove, and whatever was sealed inside her would have gone down with her. Wren stood up slow. Her hands weren't shaking. "But they wanted to. Somebody doesn't want us to find it," Augie said. "No," Wren said. She looked up the dark pier the way the man had run. "Somebody doesn't want it found at all. By anybody. Ever." They didn't sleep again that night. At first light, they got the pry bar and the chisel from the workshop. They climbed down into the hold. Wren held the flashlight in her teeth and went to work on the epoxy. It was tough. Whoever sealed this had done it right. Sanded the surface, primed it, sealed it against the sea. This wasn't a quick patch job. This was preservation. It took 20 minutes to break the first 6 inches free. The epoxy cracked off in small gray pieces and fell into the bilge with soft splashes. She worked the chisel down the left side, across the bottom, up the right. Augie caught the panel before it dropped into the water. Behind it was a cavity, 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep, and inside the cavity sat a marine chest. Dark green, heavy duty, the kind commercial fishermen used to keep documents and electronics dry. 2 brass latches and a 3-digit combination lock. Wren pulled it out. Heavy, maybe 20 pounds. She set it on the floor of the hold, and they both knelt over it in the flashlight beam. "Locked?" Augie said. Wren looked at the lock. 3 dials, 0 through 9. Then she turned the flashlight on the back of the panel they'd just pried off. Something was scratched into the steel. Small, precise, etched with a sharp tool. "Sanisa." "He wanted it found," Wren said softly, "by somebody who looked carefully enough." She dialed 3, 1, 4. The lock clicked open. Inside, everything was wrapped in plastic. 3 leather journals, covers worn soft from years of handling, a thick manila envelope, a smaller envelope of photographs, and on top of all of it, lying flat, a single sealed letter. The front read, in careful, old-fashioned handwriting, "To whoever finds this." Wren picked it up. She looked at Augie. He nodded. She opened it. The handwriting was neat, the kind they used to teach in schools. 2 pages, torn from a notebook. "If you are reading this, you found what I hid." "Good. That means the eider is still afloat, which means she outlasted them, which is exactly what I built her to do. My name is Elias Thorne. I've been a fisherman in Cedar Point since I was 16 years old. I am writing this because tomorrow I have to leave, and I do not think I am coming back. There are people in this town who want me gone, people with authority. I know something they do not want known, and I made the mistake of telling them I knew. That was foolish. I should have let the evidence speak for itself, but I am an old man, and I was never any good at staying quiet when something was wrong. Everything is in these journals. Every dollar, every name, every date. 30 years of it. The last 3 are the ones that matter most. If you are reading this, it means they got what they wanted. I am gone. But the truth is still here. Do with it what I could not. The eider is the key. Whoever holds her holds everything. God bless you for looking. Elias Thorne. Wren set the letter down. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The bilge water dripped. The hull ticked as the morning sun warmed it. He knew he was going to die, Augie said quietly. Or he knew he'd never come back, Wren said. Either way, he planned for this. She looked down at the 3 journals, at 30 years of a stranger's handwriting. At a secret somebody had tried to sink in the dark of the night, and up on the deck above them, footsteps crossed toward the gangway. A knock on the hull. A man's voice, friendly and smooth, came down through the open hatch. "Hello? Anybody aboard?" "It's Hollis." "Hollis Drum, harbor master. Just came by to welcome our new owners to the dock." Wren and Augie looked at each other across the open chest, across the letter, the journals, the photographs, across a dead man's secret, finally pulled up into the light after 8 years in the dark. Wren slid the lid of the chest closed, quiet, slow. Then she stood and climbed up toward the smiling man waiting on her deck. Wren came up through the hatch and into the morning light, and there he was, Hollis Drum, standing on her deck like he owned the planks under his feet. He'd changed out of the windbreaker from the auction. Today he wore a pressed shirt and clean pants, the outfit of a man making an impression on purpose. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that started at the mouth and never made it up to the eyes. "There she is," he said. "The new captain." "Can I help you?" Wren said. "Just being neighborly. Came by to welcome you to the harbor." He looked past her, down at the open hatch. "Settling in, all right? Everything where it should be." Wren stepped sideways, just enough to put herself between Hollis and the hole. "Everything's fine," she said. "Good, good." He rocked back on his heels, looked out at the water. "She's a tough old boat. Elias kept her up. Back when." A pause. "You sleep okay last night?" "Quiet down here at the docks. Mostly." And there it was. Wren felt it land in her chest like a stone. He knew. He knew about last night, the man on the deck, the cut line. Maybe he'd sent him, maybe he'd been him. Either way, this wasn't a welcome. This was a man checking to see what had survived the night. She kept her face still. She'd spent 14 years learning how to keep her face still. "Slept fine," she said. "Listen." Hollis clasped his hands together. "Friendly. I'll be straight with you. You two are young, and that boat needs work. The engine alone will cost more than you've got. I'd hate to see you pour what little you have into a hole in the water." He smiled again. "I'd be willing to take her off your hands. 5,000 cash today." Augie's head appeared in the hatch. 5,000, Augie said. "For a boat you let go for 10. The town let it go. I just keep the harbor running." Hollis didn't blink. "I've got a soft spot for the old boats. Sentimental. Elias was a fixture around here. I'd hate to see the Eider end up in a scrapyard." "We're not selling," Wren said. The smile held for one more second. Then it didn't. Not anger, not yet. But the start of it. A tightening along the jaw. A man learning that the easy way wasn't going to work. "Think about it," Hollis said. 5,000's more than fair. You could buy a real car. Get back on the road. Find somewhere warm before winter." He looked at the two of them one more time. Then he walked back up the dock toward the harbor office, unhurried, like a man who owned the ground and knew it. Wren watched him until he was gone inside. "He knows we found something," she said. "He doesn't know what?" "No. He knows somebody finally got on that boat." She looked down at the hatch. "That's enough to scare him. Look at him. He's terrified." That afternoon, they took the chest up to the main cabin, where the light was good. Augie spread a towel on the fold-down table. They laid everything out. 3 journals, the manila envelope, the photographs. Wren opened the first journal. The earliest entries went back over 30 years. Elias Thorne's handwriting, looser here than in the letter. He wasn't writing for a stranger. He was writing for himself. The first pages were just a fisherman's life. Hauls of bluefish, the fuel bill, the slip fee, a line about fixing the roof before winter, and a woman's name. "Della wants the roof done before the cold. She's right. She's always right," his wife Augie said. "Maybe." Wren turned the pages. Fishing logs, household records, small notes about the town, a man keeping track of his life, plain and direct. Then, about 60 pages in, the first one that made her stop. She read it out loud. "Heard at the diner that Tomas Reyes can't make his dock payment this month. Medical bills from the surgery. Went to the harbor office after hours and paid it. Told the clerk to mark it anonymous. Tomas doesn't need to know. He just needs to keep fishing." Wren read it again. Then she turned the page, put $200 in an envelope, and slid it under the Alvarez door. "Their youngest needs glasses. 200 covers the exam and the frames. Did it after dark. Maria will think it came from the church fund, and the next paid the back taxes on the Holloway place. 3 years overdue. County was going to seize it in January. $412. Most of what I saved this season. But the Holloways have 4 kids and nowhere else to go. Augie had come around to read over her shoulder. Keep going, he said. So she did. Page after page. Year after year. Because Elias Thorne had been doing this for over 30 years. Anonymous checks to the power company when a family fell behind. Cash slid under doors in the dead of night. He paid the funeral costs for a deckhand who died without insurance. He funded a local girls' nursing school. 4 years of tuition, mailed with no return address. He covered a widow's mortgage for 6 months after her husband drowned in a storm, and he wasn't rich. The fishing logs made that brutally clear. He caught what everyone else caught, sold at the same prices, paid the same fuel bills. But his own life cost almost nothing. He lived on the boat. He ate what he caught. He wore the same clothes until they came apart. The gap between what he earned and what he kept went straight into other people's lives. Near the end of the first journal, one line stopped, ran cold. Being invisible doesn't make you useless. It makes you free to do what's right without anybody watching. She read it twice. Then she closed the journal and sat back against the bench. Because Wren knew something about being invisible. She knew what it was to walk into a room and have people look past you, to be the kid in the secondhand coat at the school nobody pictured going anywhere, to age out of a system with 2 words in a paper bag, invisible. She'd always thought of it as the worst thing you could be. And here was a man, an old, quiet, stubborn man, who had taken the very thing the world used to erase him and turned it into a kind of power. He saved this whole town, Augie said. For 30 years. And nobody knew. Nobody was supposed to know. They opened the second journal, and the warmth went out of the cabin, not the air. Something else. Something in the writing. The tone here was sharper, more careful. This wasn't a record of quiet kindness. This was a record of something rotten. Harbor Maintenance Fund balance doesn't match the posted statement. Short by $6,400. Check the ledger at the clerk's office. The numbers don't add up. Asked Hollis. He said it was a clerical error. 2 weeks later, checked again. Now the shortfall's $8,000. Hollis filed an amended statement. But the original line items don't match the amendment. He changed the numbers after I asked. Wren felt the chill settle in her bones. Because the man who'd stood on their deck 2 hours ago with that dead smile was a thief. The entries went on, methodical, patient. Elias had tracked every discrepancy. He'd photocopied bank statements. He'd matched posted budgets against the work that was actually done. Over 2 years of entries, the pattern became undeniable. Hollis Drum, harbor master of Cedar Point, skimming maintenance funds, tens of thousands of dollars over a decade. And in the manila envelope, the proof, bank statements with figures circled in red pen, photocopied checks, budget documents with line items highlighted, photographs of docks that were supposed to have been rebuilt and never were, seawalls supposed to have been replaced. None of the work done, all of the money gone. This wasn't a sloppy pile of suspicions. It was a case, a documented, chronological, airtight case for exactly where the money went. And who took it? This is enough, Augie said quietly. Enough to put a man in prison. It's enough to get a 74-year-old man run out of his own town. Wren said. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, sorting, dating, matching photos to budget line, and then Augie went still. He'd been going through the second journal again, slower this time, and his finger had stopped near the back on a page where the binding sat strained. Wren? What? This page. It's thicker than the others. He held it up to the lantern. 2 pages had been glued together at the edges, carefully, by hand. The same patient hand that had sealed a steel panel against the sea. Wren took it. She worked a thumbnail along the seam. The old glue gave. The pages came apart, and there was an entry, hidden inside its own journal. She read it out loud, and her voice went quiet halfway through. This is the part I cannot write, where anyone might find it easy. 12 years ago, Hollis Drum came to me. Not as the harbor master, as a father. His girl was sick. Real sick. The kind of sick that empties a man's accounts and then keeps reaching. He had no one else to ask. I do not think he had ever asked anyone for anything in his life. I paid for the treatment, all of it. I told him to never speak of it. He never did. His daughter lived. I write this down because I need someone, someday, to understand. The man stealing from this harbor is not a monster. I know that. I knew his face when there was nothing behind it but fear for his child. That is what makes this so hard. I helped him once, and he repaid me by trying to bury me. A good turn does not buy you a good man. I have lived 74 years to learn that. Kindness is not a loan. You give it, and then you let it go. And sometimes the person you saved is the one who comes for you in the dark. I do not regret saving his daughter. I would do it again tomorrow. But God help me. I never thought the bill would come due like this. Ren set the journal down on the towel. The cabin was very quiet because everything had just gotten harder. It would have been so simple if Hollis were just a villain, a thief in a pressed shirt with a dead smile. You could hate a man like that. You could take him down and sleep fine, but he wasn't simple. He was a father who'd watched his child almost die. And a man Elias Thorne had pulled back from the edge with his own hands. And then he turned around and tried to sink the man who saved him. He owed Elias everything, Augie said. Everything. And that's exactly why he couldn't stand him. Ren stared at the lantern flame. You can't look at the man who saw you at your weakest. Not every day. Not at your own counter. It eats you. She thought about all the people who'd helped her over the years. The few. The handful. And how part of her had always wanted to run from them the second the help was given. Because being seen that low, being saved, it cost something to be saved. She'd never had words for it before. Elias Thorne had spent his last journal entry finding them. In the morning, a knock came on the hull. It was Marlene with a paper bag and 2 coffees. She climbed down into the cabin, and she saw the journals spread across the table. The letter, the photographs. She didn't ask what they were. She set the bag down, poured herself a cup of water from the tap, and sat down slow on the bench seat. Tell me, she said. So they told her. Not the corruption. Not yet. Just the first part. The 30 years of quiet help, the envelopes under doors, the bills paid in the dark. Marlene's face changed as Ren read the passages aloud. She put her hand over her mouth once. Then she took it away and folded both hands in her lap and held very still. Tomas Reyes, she said. That was my brother. Ren stopped reading. He had back surgery. Years ago. They couldn't make the slip payment that month. I remember it because I was sick with worry we'd lose everything. Marlene's voice was steady but thin. Then the harbor office said it had been paid. An anonymous donation? Tomas thought it was the church. He went to that church every Sunday for the rest of his life, thanking God for it. It was Elias, Augie said. Marlene nodded slow. He sat at my counter every morning for 30 years. Black coffee, no cream, no sugar, never more than 10 words. She stopped. Every Christmas, somebody's tab at the diner would just be paid, and nobody knew who. I always wondered. She looked down at the journals. It was him. It was always him. She wiped her eyes once with the back of her hand. She didn't cry. She just wiped them. And then she was steady again. A woman who'd buried people and kept the diner open the next morning. What else is in there? She said. Ren looked at Augie. He gave a small nod. The last 2 journals are different, Ren said. They're about the harbor, about money that went missing, about someone who's been stealing from this town. Marlene's face didn't move, but something behind it sharpened. Who? She said. We're not ready to say. We need to be sure of what we're holding first. Marlene studied them both for a long moment. Then she stood. You 2 are 19 years old, she said. You bought a dead man's boat for $10, and now you're sitting on something that could split this town wide open. She paused at the cabin door. Be careful who you trust with it. Cedar Point is small. People here have long memories and short fuses. She climbed back onto the dock, and before she walked off, she stopped and looked back down at them. That man on your deck the night before last, she said. The one who ran. She let it hang. Lock your hatch, and don't sleep too deep. Then she was gone up the dock toward the diner. Wren and Augie looked at each other. She knew. Of course she knew. In a town this small, everyone knew everything, which meant Hollis knew that everyone would notice whatever he did next, which meant whatever he did next would be quiet. They went to see Cora Thorne that afternoon. The little gray house past the post office, where the streets ran out and the salt marsh began. A bird feeder on the porch. A mailbox that said Thorne in faded paint. Wren knocked. Augie stood a step behind her, the first journal held against his chest. The door opened. Cora Thorne was a small woman in her late 60s, white hair cut short, eyes that looked like they'd been waiting a long time for something, a flannel shirt, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at the two of them the way you look at strangers who've come to tell you something, and you already half know what it is. Then she saw the journal. Her hand went to the door frame. She didn't grab it for support. She just laid it there, like she needed to feel something solid under her palm. You bought the boat, she said. Yes, ma'am, Wren said. And you found what he left. It wasn't a question. She stepped back and let them in. The house was small and clean. Framed photographs on every surface. A young man on a boat. The same man older, weathered, lean, squinting into the sun. Elias Thorne at every age, living his life across the walls of his sister's home. Cora sat in an armchair. They took the couch. Wren set the journal on the coffee table between them. He called me, Cora said. The night before he left. He said he couldn't stay. He said everything was on the boat. He said not to worry. Her voice pulled tight like a line. That was the last time I heard his voice. 8 years ago. Did you know what he hid? Wren asked. I knew he kept journals. He always kept journals. And I knew something was wrong at the harbor. He told me pieces, not the whole of it, enough. She looked at her hands. He said Hollis Drum was stealing, that he had proof that Hollis was threatening him. Did you go to anyone? The county? The police? Cora shook her head. With what? Elias said the proof was on the boat, but I could never get on the boat. After he vanished, the town impounded the Eider. Hollis made sure of it, filed paperwork saying the harbor was owed back fees. The boat sat at that slip 8 years and nobody was allowed near it. She looked up at Wren until the auction, which I didn't even hear about until it was over. Nobody told me. The clock on the mantel ticked. Cora picked up the journal. She opened it to a random page. Her lips moved with the words. She turned to another and another, not reading in order, just dipping into her brother's voice. The way you test bathwater with your wrist. She stopped on a page. The Holloway family is about to lose their house, she read. $412 in back taxes. I paid it. Where are 4 children supposed to go? She closed the journal. I didn't know about this one. He helped a lot of people, Augie said. For 30 years, nobody knew. He wasn't a soft man. Cora set the book down. Don't let anybody tell you he was a saint. He was hard, quiet, didn't suffer fools. He didn't give with warmth. He gave with stubbornness. He'd see a wrong and he'd just fix it. And he didn't want thanks. Couldn't stand to be thanked, truth be told. Wren took a breath. There's more, she said. He found out Hollis was stealing from the harbor. He confronted him. Hollis threatened him, sent men to watch him from the dock. She paused. And there's something else. In one of the journals, something he hid even inside the book, she told Cora about the daughter. The sickness, the treatment Elias had paid for, the man he'd saved. Cora listened to all of it without a word. When Wren finished, the old woman sat very still. I always knew Hollis had something to do with my brother leaving, she said finally. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. The way he looks when anyone says Elias's name, the way he's avoided me in town for 8 years. He hasn't met my eyes once. We have the proof now, Wren said. All of it. Enough to take to the county. Your 2 kids, Cora said it gently. Not unkind, just honest. Nobody here knows you. Hollis has been harbor master 22 years. He has connections. He has the council's ear. And you have no standing, no history, no credibility. You walked in off the highway 4 days ago with nothing. We have the documents, Wren said. Documents can be dismissed. Questions get asked about how you came by them. He could say you planted them. He could say you're scamming the town. Cora held up her hand. I'm not saying this to stop you. I'm saying it so you walk in with your eyes open. They left with the first journal and a promise to bring the rest. In walking back to the harbor, Wren noticed something in the journal Cora had pointed out. A line at the bottom of an entry near the back. She'd skimmed past it before. She stopped on the harbor road and read it again. The Eider is the key. Whoever holds her holds everything. I've named no person, only the vessel. There is an account at the bank in Merrill's Landing. The rightful registered owner of the Eider has access to it. I have left the rest there. An account, Augie said, reading over her shoulder. He set it up so whoever owned the boat could reach it. Not a person. The boat. Our names are on the boat now. They looked at each other. There's a bus, Augie said. I saw the schedule at the gas station. Merrill's Landing. 40 miles. The bus left at 7 the next morning. $3.50 each way. They brought the registration, the deed, Elias's letter. They left the journals and the documents locked in the chest aboard the boat, and Wren put a $4 padlock on the cabin door. The branch in Merrill's Landing was a small brick building on Main Street. A woman at the front desk looked up when they came in. Two teenagers in worn clothes carrying a folder of papers. We're inquiring about an account, Wren said, established by Elias Thorne, were the registered owners of the vessel named in it. The woman looked at them a long moment. Then she picked up a phone. A man in a gray suit came out, the branch manager. He took them back to a small, clean office and asked them to explain. Wren laid out the registration, the deed, Elias's letter. The manager read the letter carefully. He looked at the registration. He typed something into his computer, and he went quiet. There is an account, he said slowly. A trust, established by Elias Thorne 8 years ago. He paused. It's structured to benefit the rightful registered owner of the vessel Eider, not a person by name. The vessel, that's us, Wren said. She slid the deed across the desk. He compared the deed against his screen, checked the vessel number against the registration, asked for their IDs. Wren had a state card. Augie had his. This will take a few days to fully process and verify, he said, but the trust appears legitimate, and the ownership chain is clear. Mr. Thorne set this up with considerable care. How much is in it? Wren asked. The manager looked at his screen. He leaned back in his chair. Mr. Thorne contributed to this account for over 25 years, he said, consistently, and he directed the investments through our managed portfolio. He paused. As of this month, the balance is $387,500. Wren didn't move. Augie didn't move. The number hung in the air between them and the desk. $387,000. The same man who lived on canned food, 3 shirts, who slid envelopes under doors with money he barely had. He'd been building this the entire time. A last net for the town that would outlast him. There are distribution guidelines, the manager went on. Mr. Thorne specified the funds are for the benefit of the Cedar Point Harbor community. Infrastructure. Emergency help for fishing families. Education. He looked up. The registered owner of the Eider serves as trustee. They rode the bus back in silence. The number was too big to hold. They'd been counting their lives in single dollars for over a year. 3 for coffee and toast, 4 for a padlock, 10 for a boat, and now they held the key to nearly $400,000. None of it theirs to spend on themselves. They got back to Cedar Point as the light was going copper over the water. And they knew, both of them, the second they came down the pier road, something was wrong. The Eider sat lower than she should have, listing hard to port, wrong angle, wrong line in the water. Wren broke into a run. The cabin door was open. The $4 padlock lay snapped on the deck. And below, through the cabin and down the open hatch, dark water was rising in the hold, faster than the bilge pump could push it out. The seacock had been opened, or a hose cut. Somebody had opened the sea to her on purpose. The chest, Wren said. She went down into the flooding cabin, cold water to her knees. She reached under the bench seat where they'd locked it. The chest was gone. No, not gone. There, wedged against the far bulkhead where the list had thrown it, half underwater, latches still shut. She hauled it up, 20 pounds soaked to 40. She got it up the steps and onto the deck, and her arms burned and her hands shook, and she didn't stop. Augie was already at the hatch, hauling the seacock closed by feel in the black water. And on the deck, weighted under a rock so the wind wouldn't take it, was a piece of paper. 4 words, block letters, a blunt pencil pressed hard enough to tear the page. Last warning, go home. Wren stood there dripping on the deck of the boat she'd bought for $10. The boat a dead man had sealed his whole life inside. The boat somebody was trying to send to the bottom for the second time in 3 days. Home? She almost laughed, because that was the thing Hollis Drum could never understand. The thing that gave her away as a stranger, the thing that made her dangerous. She didn't have a home to go to. This rusted, half-sunk, cursed old boat was the closest thing she'd ever had. And nobody was going to take it from her. She looked up at Augie across the flooding deck, water streaming off both of them in the last gold light. He thinks we'll run, she said. We always run, Augie said quietly. Every town, something goes wrong. We run. Not this time. She set the soaked chest down on the deck. Put her hand flat on the lid. 3 journals. A letter, 30 years of a good man's quiet life. Not this time, she said again, and the buoy bell rang once, far out in the dark. They saved the boat that night. Barely. Wren and Augie bailed by hand and by pump until 3 in the morning, until the water in the hold dropped below their ankles, until the eider rode level in her slip again, cold to the bone, hands raw, but level, and the chest was dry inside. Because Elias Thorne had wrapped everything in plastic 8 years ago. As if he'd known, as if he'd pictured exactly this. 2 kids on his deck at 3 in the morning, fighting the sea for his life's work. The man planned for everything, even the part where someone tried to drown it twice. By dawn, Wren had made up her mind. She didn't say it dramatic. She just said it. We're not running. Augie was sitting against the wheelhouse, soaked through, too tired to argue, but he tried anyway. We have nothing, Wren. No money. No standing, nobody here knows us. He's got the council, he's got 22 years, he rubbed his face. We're 2 kids on a half-sunk boat. I know. Then why? And Wren looked out at the harbor, going gray to gold, at the little town that didn't know it was being held together by a dead man's ghost. Because nobody ever fought for us, she said. Not once. 14 years. Not a single grown person stayed. She turned to him. Elias fought for everybody, for 30 years, and the second he was gone, they forgot him. Let his boat rot. Let his sister sit alone in a gray house wondering. That's not our fight. It's exactly our fight. Her voice didn't rise. It went quiet, which was worse, because we know what it feels like to be the person nobody sees. And we're the only 2 people on earth holding the truth. She wrapped her arms around her knees. If we run, Hollis wins. Cora dies never knowing the whole of it. And we spend the rest of our lives knowing we had the chance to make one thing right, and we walked away from it like everybody always walked away from us. Augie was quiet a long time. Then he nodded. Once? Okay, he said. Then we make it bulletproof. Cora said documents can be dismissed, so we don't give him a single crack. That morning they made copies of everything. Every page, every statement, every photograph. They mailed 1 full set to themselves, sealed, to be held at the post office. They left 1 set with Cora, and the originals, they took to the county. The county seat was in Merrill's Landing, same town as the bank. The clerk's office, a middle-aged woman behind a counter who listened to 2 teenagers with a folder of soggy-edged documents. And kept listening because the documents were good, because Elias Thorne had built a case so clean it didn't need them to be believed. The numbers spoke for themselves. Bank statements, budget records, photos of seawalls that were paid for and never built. The clerk made copies. She asked questions. She wrote things down, and she told them she'd forward all of it to the county inspector's office. On the way out, Wren stopped at the payphone outside the bus station and called the regional paper, the Merrill's Landing Register. She got the news desk. She gave the reporter the outline, the bones of it, and told him where to find the records at the clerk's office. He asked if she could meet the next day. She said yes. The story ran 3 days later. Front page of the Register. Below the fold, harbor master accused of decade-long embezzlement. And below that, smaller, Cedar Point fishermen's hidden journals reveal secret generosity and financial fraud. The article told 3 stories at once. The first was Hollis Drum, the missing harbor funds. The county inspector had already confirmed discrepancies that matched Elias's records to the dollar. The second was Elias Thorne, 30 years of anonymous giving. The reporter had tracked down 4 of the families and confirmed the payments with his own reporting. And the third was Ren and Augie, 2 kids out of foster care, who'd bought a cursed boat for $10 and found the truth everyone else had missed. The paper reached Cedar Point by noon, and Ren braced for the worst, for the town to turn on the strangers who'd come in off the highway and stirred up trouble, for the anger to land on them. But that's not what happened. What happened was silence, and then the silence broke, because people started coming forward. A man named Pete Alvarez walked into the Compass Rose and told Marlene that somebody had paid for his daughter's eyeglasses when she was 8. An envelope under the door. He'd always thought it was the church. He read the article, and now he knew. A woman named Sarah Holloway came in and sat in Marlene's booth and cried. Her parents had nearly lost the house to back taxes. They'd told her a government program covered it. There was no government program. There was Elias Thorne and a check for $412. A nurse at the county hospital called the paper. She'd gotten a full nursing scholarship from a source she could never identify. 4 years. Books and tuition and fees. She'd told everyone it was a national fund. It was a fisherman in Cedar Point who'd never said 10 words to her. The stories kept coming. For 3 days, the people of Cedar Point discovered that the quiet mercies of their lives, the paid bills, the envelopes, the debts that just vanished, had all come from one man, a man they barely noticed when he was alive, and forgotten the day he was gone. Marlene hung a photograph behind her counter. Next to the register, Elias at the wheel of the Eider, squinting at the sun. Nobody asked her to. She just did it one morning, and nobody asked her to take it down. The town had been saved for 30 years by a ghost they'd been afraid of. Hollis Drum was suspended 4 days after the article ran. The county inspector arrived in Cedar Point with a team and spent 2 days at the harbor office. They confirmed everything, the numbers matched, the missing funds were real. The contracts steered to a developer cousin were documented in town records that lined up with Elias's journal entries exactly. Hollis didn't run, he didn't deny, he sat in his house on the hill above the harbor, and he waited. On the 5th day, Ren went to see him. Augie said she didn't have to go. She said she did. Because there was one thing the journals couldn't answer. One thing only Hollis could. The man who'd run from their deck in the dark. The cut line. The flooded hold. She understood all of that. A cornered man protecting himself. But Elias, 8 years ago. A skiff drifting empty 2 miles offshore. No body, no note. She needed to look the man in the eye and ask. Hollis opened the door. He'd aged 10 years in a week. Old undershirt, sweatpants, a clean house gone lifeless, the home of a man who lived alone and had stopped caring about the details. "Come in," he said. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. Sat down across the kitchen table. "I'm not going to explain myself," he said. "I know what I did." "Then why?" Ren said. He stared at the coffee. The harbor was dying. 20 years of dying. Revenue dropped. The fleet shrank. The town cut my budget every year. I was supposed to keep up 40 slips, a seawall, 2 fuel docks, on half of what I needed. He took a drink, so I borrowed it. That's what I told myself. I'd put it back when things got better. They never got better. No. He set the cup down. And my girl was in college. My wife had left. I owed money I couldn't pay. The fund was just sitting there. And nobody was looking at the books but me. Elias was looking. The name landed on him like a blow. He flinched. Elias. He said it quiet. That old man sat on his boat and saw everything. He came to my office with a folder and told me to stop, to put it back. Hollis's voice cracked, and I panicked. I didn't plan anything. I just reacted. I threatened him. I used the debt he held over me. I brought men to scare him off. You did more than scare him. Ren leaned in. I need you to tell me. The night he took that skiff out, did you? No. His head came up. His eyes were wet and wide. No. God, no. I didn't touch him. I swear it on my daughter's life. I didn't lay a hand on that man. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. But I'll tell you what I did do. The day before he left, he came to me one last time. Said he'd hidden it all where I'd never find it. Said the truth would outlast us both. And I told him. His voice broke all the way. I told him this town would be better off if he just disappeared. The kitchen went silent. He went out the next night, Hollis whispered, and he never came back. And I have to live every single day not knowing if I'm the reason. If I put that idea in a tired old man's head. He looked up at her, ruined. I didn't kill him. But I'll never know if I'm why he's dead. And that's worse. That's so much worse. Ren sat with it, because here was the thing she'd come for. And it wasn't a monster. It wasn't a clean villain she could hate and walk away from. It was a father who'd been saved once and had repaid the man who saved him with 7 words that may have sent him to the bottom of the sea. She thought about Elias's hidden entry. A good turn doesn't buy you a good man. Kindness is not a loan. He'd known. He'd known exactly what kind of man Hollis was, and he'd saved his daughter anyway. And it had cost him everything. And he'd do it again tomorrow. He'd written that. He'd do it again. Ren stood up. He paid for your daughter's treatment, she said. Hollis went white. The cup stopped halfway to his mouth. What? 12 years ago, when she was sick. The money that came through, the treatment you could never afford and never understood how you got. Ren's voice was steady. It was him, Elias. He wrote it down so somebody would know someday. He told you to never speak of it. So you never did. You never even knew who to thank. Hollis Drum set the coffee cup down with a hand that had started to shake. And then this big, thick-necked man who'd run a harbor for 22 years, who'd stolen and threatened and lied, put his face in his hands at his own kitchen table. Anne broke. He saved her, he said into his palms. He saved my Annie. And he couldn't finish it. He didn't have to. Ren stood there a moment. She didn't forgive him. That wasn't hers to give. The families he'd robbed, the harbor he'd starved, the old man he may have broken with 7 words. That was a debt no kitchen table tears could clear. But she'd come for the truth. And she had it now. We didn't steal from people who trusted us, she said quietly. That's the only difference between you and us, Mr. Drum. We had nothing too. And we still didn't do what you did. She walked out. She didn't slam the door. She just left it open behind her and walked down the hill to the harbor. The county charged Hollis with embezzlement and misappropriation of public funds. And this time, he didn't fight. He cooperated fully, opened his records, his accounts, his correspondence. He confirmed every detail in Elias's journals and gave the inspectors things they hadn't even found. It wasn't redemption. It was accountability. The hearing was held at the county courthouse in December. Ren and Augie didn't go. They heard about it from Marlene, who heard it from Sarah Holloway, who'd driven over to watch. Hollis pleaded guilty. He read a statement. He named the amounts, the dates, the methods. He made no excuses. He said it had started with one small withdrawal in a bad year, and one bad decision had become 20 more. And then he said the thing nobody expected. He said that a man in this town had once saved his daughter's life in secret, and that he had repaid that man by trying to bury him, and that he would carry that every day for the rest of his. The judge gave him 18 months in a minimum security facility, 5 years probation. Restitution he could never fully pay. His harbor master certification revoked for good. Cedar Point didn't forgive him. The town wasn't built for quick forgiveness. But they'd heard him. They'd watched a man stand up and say what he'd done with no lawyer hiding behind him. and some folks thought that was worth something, even if they couldn't say what. The evening after the sentencing, Marlene made up a plate of food, covered it in foil, and left it on Hollis Drum's doorstep. No note, no words, just a warm plate on a cold December night. The same thing somebody had once done for her family, years ago, when an anonymous envelope appeared and saved them from losing everything. She had known then that it was Elias. She knew now, and she understood that the chain of grace doesn't stop because the man who started it is gone. You just pick it up and you carry it forward. To the next person who's down, even the ones who don't deserve it, especially, maybe, the ones who don't. The Hale Harbor Trust was formed 6 weeks later. A lawyer from the county helped them set up the foundation. Cora Thorne sat on the board. Marlene sat on the board. Augie kept the books, tracking every dollar with the same lists and discipline that had kept the two of them alive on the road. And Wren served as trustee, a 19-year-old girl who'd walked into town with $43. Now signing off on repairs to a harbor that had been crumbling for a decade. The first act of the trust was the main pier, the pilings that had been rotting under a maintenance budget that never existed. 3 dry-docked fishing boats went back in the water, a new fuel pump, the north seawall, falling into the channel for years, reinforced with new concrete and rebar. The work Hollis's stolen money should have done. Finally getting done. Wren got a real job too. A marine mechanic named Dale Perkins ran a shop on the commercial pier. Wren walked in with grease already on her hands and told him she could rebuild a marine diesel. He pointed at a seized outboard on the bench. Show me. She had it running in 2 hours. He hired her that afternoon. Not charity. A job. And every week, she got better at it. Dale taught her things the boatyard men never had. Electrical, hydraulics, electronics, and in return she showed up early and worked hard and never complained, which Dale said was all he'd ever asked of anyone. Augie was studying for his GED at the county library, 3 days a week on the bus. He studied the way he did everything, lists and discipline, and the quiet certainty that knowledge was the one thing nobody could take away from him. And the Eider. Wren rebuilt her engine piece by piece. New fuel lines, cleaned injectors, a rebuilt water pump, a starter she found at a salvage yard 30 miles down the coast. The first time the diesel turned over and caught, the sound rolled across the whole harbor. A dock worker 2 piers over looked up. Marlene came out onto the diner porch and stood there listening, a dish towel in her hand. The Eider had been silent for 8 years. Now she had a heartbeat again. Cora came to the boat almost every day. She'd walk down from the gray house, cross the harbor road, and climb aboard. She sat in the wheelhouse in a folding chair Wren had set there for her. Sometimes she read from the journals. Sometimes she just looked at the water. He'd have hated the attention, she told Wren one afternoon. All of it. The newspaper. The board. He'd have hated every minute. She smiled at the harbor, but seeing the boats go out again, seeing the seawall hold, that would have made him happy. Do you miss him every day? Every day. But it's different now. Cora folded her hands. Before, I missed him, and I was angry. Angry he left. Angry nobody cared. Angry his name was just gone. She looked at Wren. Now I miss him, and I'm proud. The whole town knows what he was. That matters. 3 months after they'd come to town, on a cold, bright morning in late January, Cora brought a paper bag down to the boat. She climbed aboard and called them up from the cabin. She took out a photograph in a simple wooden frame. A young man on the deck of the Eider, maybe 30, lean and strong, sleeves rolled, hands on the rail. The harbor behind him full of boats, full of life. He wasn't smiling, but his face was open and calm, the face of a man who knew exactly where he belonged. That's Elias, Cora said. I took it the day he bought the boat. He was 30, paid for her with 3 years of fishing savings. She handed it to Wren. He'd have liked you. He always had a soft spot for people who refused to quit. Wren set the photograph on the shelf above the galley. Right by the porthole where the morning light came in, Elias Thorne, 30 years old, standing on the deck of the boat that outlasted him. That afternoon, they took the Eider out of the harbor for the first time. Wren at the wheel, Augie on the bow. Cora in her chair in the wheelhouse, watching the breakwater slide past on both sides. The engine ran smooth and strong. The hull cut the water clean. The boat that hadn't moved in 8 years moved now, steady and sure, carrying 3 people out into open water on a cold January afternoon. They didn't go far. A mile offshore, maybe 2, just far enough to feel the ocean under them, to turn and see the town from the water the way Elias had seen it every morning of his life. The docks, the pier, the rooftops, the compass rose on the corner, small from here. The gray house at the edge of town where a woman had waited 8 years for answers. The town looked different from the sea, smaller, more fragile, the kind of place that could disappear if nobody took care of it. Elias Thorne had taken care of it, quietly, invisibly, for 30 years. And now, a 19-year-old girl who'd arrived with nothing was carrying it forward. They turned back as the sun dropped. The water went gold and silver and flat. Wren eased the eider through the channel and brought her alongside Slip 14 and cut the engine, and the boat settled into her mooring with a slow, familiar creak. Cora climbed onto the dock. She stood there a moment, looking at the eider, freshly painted, engine running, alive again. "Thank you," she said. But she wasn't talking to Wren or Augie. She was talking to the boat, or the man who'd built his whole life on it. Maybe both. She walked back toward her house, and Wren and Augie watched her go. The harbor was settling into evening. Fishing boats coming in through the channel, running lights bright against the darkening water. The fuel dock light came on, a steady amber glow, laying a long, shimmering line across the cove. Wren leaned against the wheelhouse door. Augie sat beside her, the notebook in his lap. He had a new list going. Not towns to walk to, not places to sleep. Things to fix on the boat, things to learn, things to remember. The list was longer than any he'd ever made, because, for the first time in either of their lives, the future wasn't something to survive. It was something to build. A $10 boat and a dead man's journals, Wren said. That's all it took. That's not all it took. Augie closed the notebook. It took us. 2 people who knew what it felt like to be invisible, who knew what it looked like when nobody came. Wren thought about that. They'd come to Cedar Point with $43 and a dead car. 2 kids the world had filed away and forgotten, walking down a highway toward a town that was forgetting itself. They'd bought the only thing they could afford, a boat nobody wanted, and they'd found the only thing that mattered. Not the money, not even the justice. The proof that one person, living quiet, choosing to see what everyone else walked past, could hold a whole town together, and never once need to be seen doing it. Elias Thorne had been invisible his entire life. So had they, and that was exactly why they were the ones who found him. The harbor was dark now, the water still. A buoy bell rang once, far out, the same bell Wren had heard her first night aboard. The eider rocked at her mooring, gentle, steady, the way she'd rocked for 8 years while she waited. But she wasn't waiting anymore. None of them were, because the people nobody sees, they're so often the ones holding everything together. Elias knew that, and now, so did they.